We go to Happy Valley. Indiana survives Penn State 27-24. It is the first time that Indiana has ever made it to 10 wins in back-to-back seasons. They've only done it twice, last year and this year, obviously both under Kirk Cignetti. So with Indiana winning for the first time ever in Happy Valley, Trey, they needed that immaculate catch from Cooper Jr. in the back of the end zone. Maybe the most concentration I've ever seen in getting the feet down in bounds. But I think from a larger perspective, Indiana finding a way against a very tough defense on the road to win certainly, I think, gives a lot of confidence for folks that are believing that this Hoosiers team is a national championship favorite.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, especially down in our part of the country, will look at Penn State's record and absolutely scoff at what Indiana did today. How did you need all that to beat a team by 3 points that's now 0-6 in Big Ten play? This is still one of the most talented teams in the conference, one of the most talented teams in the country, and guys that are still playing for pride and maybe playing for opportunities on this roster or their next roster next year, be that the NFL or in the transfer portal. So Penn State, 2 weeks in a row now, has given the top two teams in the country all they can handle. Very, very impressed with Indiana when nothing is going right, when you're missing your top wide receiver, right? Elijah Surratt not in there. Charlie Becker steps up and has a big game, over 100 yards receiving. Omar Cooper, like you mentioned, has the concentration from him was incredible. The concentration from the official. We give officials a lot of crap on this show, rightfully so. That ref, man, was right on it, looking right at the play, made a fantastic call that got upheld after review. So, yeah, shout outs all around for that one. But Fernando Mendoza, when you think about a Heisman caliber season, right? This is a guy that did not have his A-plus game. He didn't have his B or maybe even his C game today without his top wide receiver. But when it mattered the most, when you gave him just enough time to make something happen, he's 5 of 9 on that last drive, makes a perfect throw that only Omar Cooper could catch, and then his wide receiver goes up and makes the play. So, I mean, the stats aren't going to pop off the page today, but when you talk about a Heisman moment, that certainly felt like one.
Yeah, and shout out to Charlie Becker. Obviously didn't make the game-winning catch. That was Omar Cooper Jr., who I saw immediately started to get some run from some scouts and Pro Football Focus about his draft stock, of course. But Charlie Becker was really kind of the player of the game for Indiana. 7 catches, 118 yards. He only had 7 catches for just a shade over $150 coming in all season. But with Elijah Surratt out with that hamstring, there was somebody that needed to step up and fill the void. And Penn State was very tough on the running game early, but Becker was able to find soft spots in the coverage. And that was really how Indiana moved the football for the most part in that game. Now, on the other side, I know Penn State finds another way to lose a close one against a top opponent. This is their 5th straight loss overall. But I was impressed with the way that Penn State not only showed up the football team, but their fans as well. I mean, there is so much reason to doubt what's going on in Happy Valley and kind of just pack it up, get ready for next year. But the fact that Penn State had a lead up until the last, few seconds in this ball game, I thought spoke volumes about where that program is, where the guys were. Ethan Grunkemeyer talked about it afterwards. He said everybody is determined to show up and play for each other, right? So, quick hat tip to Penn State. I thought they did a good job. For Indiana, I do want to make one quick comment because I think what they did today was impressive. But as we set the stage for all the debates that we're going to have, and probably our next topic too, on who should be the top team in the country, one of the metrics that the committee must take into account, and I know that Mack Rhodes already stuck his foot in his mouth by saying that, well, the schedule is what the schedule is, and we don't really give too much credence to that. What Indiana has done in the Big Ten, blowing teams out, and what they are currently doing must be underscored by the fact that 5 of their 9 conference opponents, guys, are currently a combined 2-29 in conference. That includes 4 of their final 5 opponents, including Penn State, who obviously they sent to 0-6, Michigan State, who they beat earlier in the season, also included in that. And those stats compiled by our friend over on Twitter, John Tweet Sports. There's no way around it. Indiana is playing currently, I think, the softest conference schedule in the Power 4. And so I think there's going to be the conversation that no matter what you see on the field, it may be underscored by the fact that their opponents outside of Penn State really aren't that good, aren't doing anything in the league. So kind of your comments, your thoughts on that, Garrett, we'll start with you. Like, how does that help complete the Indiana picture in your mind as the committee gets ready to meet on Tuesday night?
Well, the first thing I want to say is I think a lot of Indiana fans have to understand how thrilled you should be that we're even at the nitpick start of or part of the season, right? Like it's if you're getting nitpicked for the way that you're winning games and the way that you're looking winning games, it means you're in a really good spot, right? That should be kind of the thing that we start with if you're an Indiana fan. But look, fact of the matter is, in two of your bigger games against the more talented teams, you think about Iowa, who they kind of just got by what 5, I think was the final margin of victory, and then you escape, and if we're being honest, kind of lucky to escape against Penn State with some, I mean, amazing catches down the stretch. And there's the one that set him up and inside the pin to start with. That was an amazing catch as well. But you have to start to kind of think, okay, well, if the margins aren't quite there, and if the rest of the schedule it looks like, okay, well, we're not exactly beating up a bunch of juggernauts over here. I understand to a certain degree if you are, uh, if you're one of those guys who's saying like, okay, well, it's not always going to be a big, conference record because, half the teams have to lose every single week. And so it kind of ends up evening itself out. I get that. But these still are like you were saying, the numbers are pretty staggering as far as how bad this is. What is it? It's 2-29 or whatever it is. That's not very good. So, um, I, I think if you're going to get down to the nitpicking, if you're going to get down into the nitty gritty on it, you could make me a case why Indiana shouldn't be ahead of a team like Ohio State or A&M at this point. I think you could make that case. End of the day, I think it'll end up figuring itself out because they'll end up playing in Indianapolis and they'll either beat number one or number two and then they'll vault up there, or they'll kind of fall back down and it won't be that'll be a moot point anyways. And so um my big takeaway on all of this is just look, Indiana's a fantastic team. They have the clutch gene. That was one of the things I wanted to bring up too, Mitch. Was I mean, we talked about it on the pod this week. Would Indiana, along with Ohio State, maybe regret not challenging themselves? Right, that they hadn't really been put through a tough test where they had to really grind out a win and find a way to win when they were being challenged to the max. They've found a way to do it today, so that puts a lot of that rest in my mind. So I'm kind of thinking at some point, um, that'll turn around for them and they'll start to kind of start showing up on the bigger stages as well, as opposed to just, a 3-6, very talented, but 3-6 Penn State team.
I'll jump in and defend Indiana just a little bit because I think the thing that people often forget in this discussion is they're just absolutely destroying a lot of these worst teams, right? I know not today, the 0-6 Penn State team, but I think that not all 0-6 teams are created equal. But, you look up and down their schedule. Before, in this preseason, we talked about how if they were at this point, they should deserve the respect this year. And it's not their fault that Penn State just completely crapped the bed and had to fire their coach, right? Like we look up and down the schedule, Illinois was getting a lot of playoff hype before the season started. They had to go to Kinnick Stadium. Ask Oregon how easy it is to win there, how that went today. They went to Oregon and knocked off Oregon by 10 points. So I think this is kind of like a deeper thing, and it's not just an Indiana conversation for me. We can poke holes in everybody's resume, right? Like we can move the goalposts however we see fit for any given team. I can sit here and talk about how maybe Ohio State should have beaten Texas by more than 7 points when you look at some of the other results. Maybe they should have beaten some of the other teams on their schedule by more than they actually have. But at the end of the day, 10-0 in a power conference is 10-0 in a power conference. And we kind of have to get ourselves in this mindset of this because of the way conferences are structured now. We just kind of have to get in this mindset of, the schedules are going to be uneven and we got to figure out how to reconcile with that in our own brains, because 10-0 needs to be impressive and 12-0 or 11-0 if they get there needs to be impressive. I know down the stretch they have Wisconsin got a win today, right? Wisconsin, like these are still teams that are talented and have scholarship players as well. So it's hard for me to really beat them down when they're just beating the teams that the Big Ten hands them. And it's a much harder schedule than it was last year. Last year, I think there were a lot of concerns. But even that schedule last year included a Michigan team that we thought going in was going to be a lot better than it was.
Hate that you had to bring up the Washington Huskies and their failure today.
I know.
Officially off that bandwagon. Yeah, it's a dark time over here. But no, I think what you're saying is, I think is the most level-headed kind of opinion that you can look at all of these scheduling debates and record debates from, because yes, the non-conference, I think, is the place where we have all the room, right, to measure and say, hey, okay, you didn't challenge yourself with anybody. That should ding you when we're talking about comparable resumes. But when it comes to conference play, we even talked about this last year with Indiana. When it came to who was on their schedule, they had the national champion in Michigan and they had the national runner-up in Washington, both on their schedule. And we looked at that in our preseason previews and went, okay, those are going to be challenging games for Indiana. And then they fell apart, right? And so when it comes to the conferences, because they're all so massive and you're not going to play every other team in the conference, it really does behoove you if you get an easier draw. And I know we're going to talk about Texas A&M here in a minute. We've got some folks in the chat I know that are probably going to bring that up. I heard about that all day on Twitter. I got texts about that. And the reality is, yeah, sure. Texas A&M has not had to play Alabama and Georgia so far on their schedule, but you know what? They've taken care of business when they've needed to. And I think that is, as far as, what we're measuring other teams against in these hypothetical matchups, that's what you've got to go off of. And so I do think Indiana deserves every bit of praise, every bit of respect. They deserve to be a top 3 team in the playoff rankings.